Hello and welcome to another episode of the Diet Obsessed podcast. I am your host, Veronica Santarelli. I am a certified personal trainer, nutrition and weight loss coach, and this podcast is for those of us who are just obsessed with everything related to improving health and longevity, with a special emphasis on food, fitness, and diet culture. All right, let's get into the show. But first, if you want to support this show, there's a few ways you can do that. So this is one of my free episodes. I do a free episode every other week, and then I do a premium content show every other week. So if you want to subscribe to and hear those shows, you can subscribe to Patreon by searching the Diet Obsessed podcast. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can subscribe and get those additional shows every other week. And then there's a way to subscribe on YouTube that doesn't cost a penny. If you're watching on YouTube and you hit that subscribe button, it really supports us video podcasters, but it doesn't cost you a cent. It just ensures that you're going to get these shows delivered to your inbox every single time they show up. Every time I record one, you'll get notified. So that's really all that means. Finally, a way you can support that also doesn't cost anything is just leaving a rating and review, especially on iTunes. That really helps us podcasters, and I appreciate your support. All right, everyone, let's get right into my regular segments, my mental health check-in. Later, I'll be doing a podcast review talking about the new food pyramid. So I will get into that in a few minutes, but first, my regular segments. So today is Tuesday. I like to record on Tuesdays because I get to sleep in. Later today, I will be doing some volunteering at a local food pantry, which I love. I mean, again, it's kind of perfect that I get to volunteer and do food-related things and, package go bags, which are these bags that, people that are struggling, to feed themselves or feed their family. They can just grab these quick bags on their way. And, and it has a bunch of food. It's like food for a day, really. Lots of snacks, some healthy things. Like there's obviously a lot of ultra processed foods in there, like Pop-Tarts and, crackers and chips and stuff like that. But there's nuts, there's, peanut butter crackers. There's, there are some things in there that do have some nutrient density. And then the other things that I was really pretty impressed by is some of the food boxes they deliver, which have fresh produce. There's eggs, there's, lettuce and vegetable bags. And of course, they do put, breads and different treats and snacks and sweet things, pastries, that kind of thing as well. But a lot of donated products from different restaurants and grocery stores. So it's really lovely to be part of that. Besides that, in terms of my mental health this week, I made it through yesterday. Mondays have been so challenging this month. I don't know. This month has been, whether it's coming back from the holidays and trying to get back into the swing of things. I do think part of it is, only having that one day off and feeling like I need to really indulge this day. And I've been I've been a little bit off balance. I've been overly indulging. I've talked about a lot of it here and on some of my subscriber only shows. And I finally have reached a point where I am ready to, get back into a healthy, very healthy, consistent focus. So that's going to start in February. I'm going to do a month of almost 100%. It's not going to be perfect, but whole foods. I'm going to try to cut out all of the ultra processed foods. Now, granted, I'm going to keep stuff like protein powder, which is, highly processed, obviously. But, I'll have some Greek yogurt. So I'm not going to be 100%, but I am going to be, cutting out all of the ultra processed foods in terms of no more bags of chips, no more bags of processed sugar added popcorn, no more, bags of candy that I've been buying, and just all of this really junk. I mean, look, I love junk. I do. I have that side of me that is that junk food junkie side. And I like to indulge that side here and there. It's been a little too much fast food, a little too much of all of this stuff. And I can tell it's finally starting to really affect my mental health and how I'm feeling when I wake up and the energy I have throughout the day. And so, especially Mondays, like yesterday, especially going in for my training clients, I'm like so tired. Let me get through this 3 hours. And I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel that way when I'm trying to motivate people to work out and be their best version of themselves. So anyway, so that will start on February 1st. Now there's going to be some challenges, right? Like, we have Valentine's Day, which isn't a huge deal in my household. We don't go crazy for Valentine's Day anyway, but usually there might be like, some chocolates or some kind of treat, or, a dinner out. We try not to go out the night of Valentine's Day because it's all prefixed, everything's packed, it's overly priced. But maybe the night before, usually we'll do something. But this year, I don't know. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way to make the day special, but also stay on track. But so there's that. Did I already say the Super Bowl? For some reason, I thought the Super Bowl was this Sunday on the 1st. And I was like, okay, let me just have that last day of hurrah. And then I'll start on Monday, which is the 2nd. And technically that is one day out of the month where I was thinking about going off track anyway. So arbitrarily, whether it's the 1st day of the month or the 8th of the month shouldn't matter, but mentally for me it does. So I don't know. I don't know whether I was planning on making beer cheese and homemade pretzels, and so I'm still going to probably make that. I just don't know if I'm going to partake or not. We'll see. But I have been looking up some really delicious recipes because I do want to enjoy, just like I do when I'm indulging. I like to really, really enjoy the foods that I'm eating. And if I'm doing a whole foods month, I want it to be really, really, really delicious foods. I want to try new recipes. I want to just indulge, but do it in a very healthy, nutrient dense way filled with whole foods. So I'm excited about that. I'm actually looking forward to that. And I do need to reach this point in order to successfully complete a full month. So I've reached that point. I'm feeling blah. My clothes aren't fitting, and it's time. So Chad also is going to be going on a journey. Now he's going to be doing the GLP-1s again, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on my next show. But we're both starting our regimens here soon. Now, something else that came up on a podcast recently that I wanted to discuss in my mental health segment is the cost of groceries. Now, think about your household, okay? How much does your household spend monthly on groceries? Now, obviously, if you have children, you're spending a lot more. I can't even imagine having to feed like growing boys, for example. That must be so expensive, especially in today's economy where inflation and food prices are so high. And I am someone who, when I buy groceries, like there's all kinds of memes on Instagram about people that go and buy all these groceries and then they just go to waste because they'll end up ordering delivery or ordering food out. That is definitely not me. That is one thing that I'm very, very good about. If I have food that I've purchased that's in my refrigerator or in my closet, it is such a pet peeve if anything goes bad. Even if, 1 or 2 potatoes out of my entire bag don't get used, it bothers me. For example, right now, I had those sweet potatoes that I cut up and curried so that I could put it in my soup. And I'm down to there must be probably 1 to 2 potatoes worth of potatoes left in that container. And I'm not going to eat them. I need to go throw them away because they're now extremely old. Okay. Even I have my limit. And so I will throw those away, but it bothers me. It bothers me that I didn't eat every single last potato in that bunch that I prepared. But as long as I eat most of it, I'm okay. But to throw away, for example, like if Taylor Strecker, who I talk about on this show all the time, she'll talk about how she'll go and buy very expensive berries, like raspberries, fresh berries. And she's so like worried about eating them too fast. She wants to savor them that they end up going bad by the time she gets around to them. So that would really, I mean, spending that much money on a food product like berries, hello. That's why I only buy frozen. For the most part, I buy frozen berries to put in my superfood smoothie. That way they don't go bad. I don't have to worry about them. I will buy strawberries, and strawberries go bad very quickly. So you have to be careful about those. But anyway, my point is that I do not like to waste food. And I am proud. That is something I am proud about. If you've listened to the show for a while, you know I'm very frugal and I like to maximize my purchases. I like to utilize everything that I buy. And I listened to this podcast called Money for Couples. And it's about like a couple that's in a difficult financial position. And this guy, Rami, who's this financial guru, he talks about the psychology of money. He like helps them to come up with a plan to get out of debt, and how he ties how we think about money to our psychology of how we grew up. And of course, one of my earliest memories is my mom crying, trying to figure out how she's going to feed us. And again, I think that has played into a lot of my financial stress and worry and all of that. So I naturally, they say that a lot of couples, one is usually a spender and one is usually a saver. And those types of people are very attracted to one another. That is like Chad and I. I'm a saver, Chad's more of a spender. And I think that dynamic can work if you're on the same page about your financial goals and your plans. But a lot of couples end up wasting a lot of money on going out to eat. And they talk about like how much people waste on food, how much they spend on groceries. And some of these couples were spending, Ramit said that anywhere from like very low end, 600 to 1200. He's like, no matter who you are, you fall somewhere into that category of like 6 to 1200. And I, when I wasn't in a more difficult financial place, I would go to the grocery store, not really think about being budgeted. I would just buy whatever I wanted to. Now I am conscious, and I think especially when I went to Costco for the first time and walked out spending almost like between $500 and $600, I was like, oh my God, like you really need to go into Costco with a plan and really only buy the essentials of what you're going to use a lot of, like my meats. I buy, dog food, obviously, toilet paper, stuff like that. And then, now I'm getting my soy sauce there because we go through soy sauce quite quickly, flour, stuff like that. And all that's good, but now I'm trying not to spend more. I mean, I just spent like $250 there the other day. But I did go into it very conscious. So I'm getting all my stuff, and this was like buying the meats day. So I knew I was going to spend a little bit more. And as I was walking past the tea section, I was like, I've been wanting to get matcha. I really have, and not that I even really like matcha, but I think I've just been seeing so many people make these foamy drinks on Instagram that it's made me want to get matcha. I also know that it's very healthy for you. Tea in general is really good for you. And if I am going to splurge on something that's healthy, that's nutrient dense, that's part of my grocery spend, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to splurge on. And so so what Ramit's talked to these couples about is, cutting back and sacrificing and not just buying anything that you want. Like this woman, for example, she loved to buy these Glade plugins, like those air fresheners. And they're like $35 every time she orders. And she goes through them very, very quickly. And Ramit's like, are you kidding me? These air conditioners, these air fresheners, you're in this much, you're in $400,000 of credit card debt, but you are not credit card debt, but you're in severe debt with school bills and credit card debt, yet you're spending $35 a month on Glade plugins, which it's not a necessity, but for somebody that grew up in poverty and couldn't afford these things, like having that as a luxury was something that it was important to her. And so you just see these different things that people spend on that get them into very tough financial places. And then, so this couple that used to spend closer to like $1,000 a month, and it was just the two of them, she was talking about how she had proudly gotten the grocery bill down to $600 a month. And that was huge. Like most people do not spend less than $600 a month on groceries. And she was worried about how cutting back on all these things would affect her. She was like, this is going to be really depressing. I'm going to be really sad. And these little things bring me joy. And it ended up turning out that, they did a follow-up later, and she was so proud of how she had cut down on groceries and how she had cut out all these things. And she's like, maybe for like a couple weeks it was difficult. She's like, but now she's like, it really is not that hard. She's found different ways, just reframing how she thinks about, the things that she can spend her money on, and how she's really going to enjoy those things and savor them and make them more of an event in her life versus not really thinking about it and just spending that money. And so what I thought about is that for me personally, in this time when, I can't travel as much as I want to, or go buy all these like fancy clothes or shoes or whatever. Not that stuff is critically important to me, but yeah, would I love a new pair of sneakers? Yes. Am I going to buy them right now? No, I don't need them. I have two perfectly good pairs of sneakers that meet my needs. But do I think about that occasionally? Yeah. Could I do it? Yes, I could. Do I allow myself to? No, I'm being very disciplined right now in what I spend. But again, and I'm getting to my point here. My point is what helps my personal mental health is that I really find a lot of enjoyment in going grocery shopping and looking at the things that I am going to splurge on thoughtfully. The matcha was one of those items because because it's not cheap. Like this organic large thing of matcha was not, it was probably like, I don't know, 25, it was between $20 and $30 at Costco. And I thought about my spend that day because I've been trying to keep it to around 100, 150 at Costco. I'm like, this is going to make it significantly more. It was like a $250 spend. But I'm like, I was kind of excited thinking about the different things that I could do with it, some of the creative recipes I could make, and the health benefits. And I still haven't opened it, but I'm going to this February. I'm going to make a very healthy matcha ice cream with my Ninja Creamy. And I'm going to use the coconut milk that I got at Costco. I'm going to use some of the almond milk. I'm going to use the matcha. And that is going to be a delicious, very special dessert. I'll probably get some toasted, some coconut and toast it and do the organic 100% cacao nibs and, maybe toast up some almonds. So there's a lot of crunch and texture and really enjoy it with my matcha ice cream that I make out of my Ninja Creamy that I also invested in. I invested a lot into that Ninja Creamy and I don't use it enough. So for me, and so then I added up, even with that splurge at Costco, I added up what I spent the month of January in groceries. And I came up with a total at that point, and I totaled it up last week. I want to say it was like around $635. And I'm like, okay, that's actually really, really good. And now I'm curious next month, because I'm either going to get groceries on Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure. If I do it on Saturday, it'll fall into this month. And so that'll be probably at least another $100. So I'll be at like $730, something like that. So I'm between $600 to $800 in grocery spend every month. And I really maximize it. I mean, some of the things that when I'm going grocery shopping and I'm like, okay, for example, one of the things I am planning on getting for this recipe I'm going to make is I am going to splurge on some New York strip, some really good quality meat. And I have this incredible recipe that I'm so excited to buy. And yes, could I get flank steak and be a little cheaper? Yes. Am I going to do that? No, I'm going to splurge and get the New York strip, and it's going to have lots of herbs. It's going to be a very healthy dish, but a very delicious, high quality ingredient dish. So that's one thing that I'm excited about. There was one other thing that I was just thinking about that I was also going to splurge on as far as high quality. Oh, I know I'm gonna be getting some crab and some nice shrimp for a couple of other dishes that I want to make. So again, high quality proteins. Yes, but I believe I will stay between my $600 to $800 at the grocery store. And I do think about it. Like if I'm going to go and get these high quality ingredients and I'm going to make a dish that's equivalent to what I can get out at a restaurant and feel really good, like, okay, yes, I'm going to probably spend more initially to get all these ingredients in the house. Like recently on Amazon, part of that grocery spend, so it's actually more like $635, like $645 right now. I got this Thai chili from this dried ground Thai chili from Thailand. And I got this toasted rice powder that's essential in some of the Thai cuisine ingredients. So I splurged on those two ingredients, but once I have those in the house, I'll be able to use them consistently to make lots of those dishes. So, and I think about that too. I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend a little bit more in getting these ingredients in the house. And yes, that initial dish ultimately will cost more than what I buy out at a restaurant. But then I can make it again and again and again with these ingredients and actually save a lot of money. So again, that's how my mind thinks as I am in this frugal time, but really enjoying intentionally spending on high quality ingredients to make really incredibly delicious, nutrient dense foods. That makes me excited. That gives me joy. When I do create something that is delicious and I'm proud of and want to eat, the best. So anyway, so those are the things that are giving me good mental health days, and I'm getting excited to kind of prepare for this next month. I have a lot of eating of everything that I want to get out of the house this week. So anyway, I'll talk about it in my next couple sections. Anyway, that is my mental health check-in of the week. I hope all of you have had a great mental health week yourselves. All right, let's get into my diet culture media moment. Now, with all of what I just said about how I'm about to embark in my healthy whole foods journey for February, I what I don't want from this podcast is for this show to be triggering for people in any way, because I do think that we all have to do what's right for ourselves. And obviously we're in January. This is a time when a lot of different companies and news outlets are all talking about dieting and weight loss. And of course, we're in this skinny culture now where everybody's on the GLP-1s and doing these weight loss drugs. And I do realize that for people, it can be very, very triggering. And I don't want that. This show is for people that are in a good, healthy space, that enjoy talking about this stuff, and where it doesn't set them off in a dangerous path. And with that, I want to play this clip from my girl, Ilana Mar. And she, again, is that Olympic athlete. I talk about her a lot. I feature a lot of her clips from social media on this show. And I think that this one is very fitting to this time and exactly the kind of message that is important with these types of discussions. So here's the clip.
Some post-gym thoughts for y'all. Now that skinny is everywhere and thin is in, and weight loss drugs are being marketed to us nonstop, I don't want you guys to be ashamed or feel that you are weak-minded for getting slightly influenced by all this rhetoric. I don't want you guys to be like, well, I love myself. Why am I thinking this way? Why I don't know if I want to lose weight, but this athlete who I used to look up to is telling me to buy their weight loss drug. I don't want you to feel bad about yourself. I know that it affects me, and I love my body. My body is amazing. But even I get these thoughts of, oh, maybe I should lose a few pounds. And I do feel ashamed. I feel ashamed of myself for feeling it. But I think we also have to remember how powerful society is and how powerful the influence of social media can be. So it's okay if you're having these thoughts. It's completely normal. I'm having it. My sisters are having it. My friends are all having it. I think, can we turn it around? Can we make it not to be as small, as thin as possible? Can we change it to be, I want to feel as best as I can in my body. I want to be as strong as I possibly can. I think we just have to change the dialogue. Be kind to yourself. It is hard to see all that and how all that information constantly floating through your brain saying this is the right way to look. I'm with you on it. For me, I'm doing what's best to feel the best in myself, and that is to eat right and to lift weights and be strong. Let's all strive for that. I love you. Keep fighting the good fight out there, and I will too.
And I do think that potentially the athlete she's talking about is it Serena Williams that did the GLP-1s? She's very vocal. She's on a lot of commercials. And look, it's Serena is trying to destigmify the GLP-1 conversation, right? Because originally a lot of people were shamed for wanting to go towards these weight loss drugs. And a lot of people were afraid of being honest that this is something that they wanted to do. And now people are being way more vocal about it. And athletes like her are saying this helped her, and she at first didn't want to admit it, but it's been, life-changing for her, and all these things. And she absolutely has that right to talk about her journey and what's helped her. And clearly, by what Ilana's saying, is Ilana's been like, oh, should I do this? Do I need to lose weight? And so it does show the power of social media, of society, of social norms, of what other people are doing that influence the decision making of others. And I know for me, this whole skinny trend, like, I don't want to be skinny. I want to be, for me, my healthy version, which I know the weight that I feel good at. I know where my body feels its best. And it is when I'm eating mostly whole foods. It is when I am working out on a regular basis. And when I have been overindulging in ultra processed foods like I have been this month, I don't feel as good. It does affect my mental health. I am seeing it in how I wake up in the morning and how I drag myself out of bed and am yawning on the gym floor. Like that, I'm not serving myself well now by some of the unhealthy behaviors I have. I do need a restart and a kickstart, but that's right for me. Other people get very triggered by the thought of any type of restriction, and it sends them in a very bad way, sends them towards a bad path, an unhealthy path. So I think it's just important for us to be aware of what serves us and what doesn't, and to do what's right for us. She said at the very end, what she's going to be focusing on is eating right, working out, feeling strong. And that's what feels right to her. And I will say the same, that I feel best when I'm eating right, mostly whole foods, when I am working out on a consistent basis, when I feel strong, and when I am not carrying as much visceral fat around my midsection that I am right now. It's just that is a fact. And so for me, this is my path, this is my journey. But I like to bring these things up because I think in a show called The Diet Obsessed, which is a play on food and my love for food, of course, but also diet culture. And I do want to comment on these things, and I do want to bring about awareness. So anyway, I thought that was a worthy clip at this time of year, especially as I am embarking in my own journey. Anyway, that is my diet culture media moment of the week. All right, let's talk about a surgical situation. And similarly, this is a topic that can trigger people. I personally love to talk about the beauty industry, aesthetics, fillers, Botox, plastic surgery, all of it. So this segment is dedicated to that. So I talked about my friend recently who had, she's my friend that does all the peptides, and she has had blepharoplasty. And so she's probably like, maybe like 7 years older than me, or 6 years older than me. So she's getting all these things done prior to me. And I love to talk to her about it. She's a wealth of knowledge, and she goes to quality, reputable people. And she had been following this guy. So on Instagram, if you want to check him out, it's Nyack Plastic Surgery. Nyack is spelled Nayak. And she had been looking at him as somebody that she might want to go see, because he is Yale Harvard. Okay, I didn't realize that, but he was called the Facelift guy. And obviously everybody's talking about these deep plane facelifts, because facelifts today are not what they used to be. They're very natural looking. People just look 20 years younger. It's crazy, some of the results here. And I'm sure eventually I will get one of these, and I'm excited for the day that comes. And Taylor Strecker talks about this too, when they're more affordable for like regular people like me. And we all have heard, or at least those of us that follow the Kardashians and reality TV, Kris Jenner at 70 recently came out with this insanely well done facelift. And everyone's like, who did you go to? Who did you go to? What did you spend? And it turned out she had spent $250,000 on this facelift. And she showed a picture of her doctor. It's this like, young Jewish doctor. I think he's based out of Beverly Hills. But anyway, she looks amazing. And obviously somebody of her wealth can easily afford something like that. Well, the rest of the population, that is just not feasible. And I'm like, okay, well, that's that one guy, and most people don't charge that much. Well, so I ended up messaging this guy because he said in one of his things, he doesn't post a ton of before and afters, but the ones that he does post look amazing. And so at one point in his messaging on one of his posts, he's like, oh, message in for pricing. So I'm like, oh, let me see what he charges. And the response, $250,000 to $300,000 just for the facelift. Okay, and some of these people that look amazing are getting lots of things done. They're getting the facelift, but they're also getting fat grafting, and they're getting blepharoplasty, and they're getting a chin implant, and they're, and these are people that maybe didn't do a lot of stuff along their journey and are just getting it all done at once. And I watched this video on YouTube of this woman that had gotten lots of those types of things done, and she had spent probably like $180,000, but that was everything. That was doing the facelift, the fat grafting, the blepharoplasty, like CO2, skin resurfacing, a lot of that stuff. So he's based out of Minneapolis, I'm like, buddy, you're not in like Beverly Hills. Give me a freaking break. Who can afford this? And so anyway, so I said to Susan the other day, my friend who had showed me this guy, I'm like, do you know how much he charges? And she's like, no. And I'm like, I told her, she's like, what? She didn't realize it. So there is this other woman that I follow. For anybody out there that's considering getting work done, there is a woman called Miss Derm, MRS.Derm. And I did a podcast on the show that she was on. And she's married to this like board certified dermatologist, but she also, so she obviously gets the non-surgical stuff done quite a bit, but she also does believe in facelifts and all that stuff. So she recently had one, and she went to a guy, and she tells you who it is. Let me get his name, Dr. Christian Jacob, out of Louisiana, did the facelift. And when she talked about it on this podcast, she said it was only like $35,000, and really incredible work. She looks really good, this woman. So that's who I'm going to look into. Let me tell you, that's who I'm going to look into, because there's lots of great surgeons out there. Now, you do want to do your research. You do want to make sure that you are referred and you look at their before and afters, and you look at these celebrities that are still getting not great work done, or not too far ago they botched their facelift or their boob job, like Tara Reid and Priscilla Presley. You're like, what is wrong with these people that, like Donatella Versace finally went and got her bad facelift fixed, and she looks amazing now. It's like, girl, with your amount of money to get bad work done is crazy. But it's always a risk, right? People can die on the surgery table. So that's what you need to, of course, consider if you're going to be doing one of these things. But anyway, I'm looking at a guy named Hobgoods for my bleph when I'm finally going to go do that, hopefully in a year or two. And then who knows how old I'll be when I get a facelift, but I know no matter how much money I have, I'm not spending $250,000 to $300,000 on a facelift. That is insane. Crazy. Who does that? Who charges that? Anyway, that is my surgical situation of the week. Oh, right. Let's get into my healthy habits of the week. So this week, or last week and this week, I'm not completely 100% off track. I am eating some healthy things during the week. So I'm still I talked about this Chinese Asian sauce that I made that I didn't love because I used this Chinese 5-spice in it. Turns out the longer that it's been sitting in my refrigerator, kind of I don't know, letting all the flavors release and get stronger, it actually has masked some of the cinnamon taste. It's actually getting more savory and more delicious over time. So I ended up using more of that on the rest of the pork and some rice. And I have been doing my Greek salad with some feta cheese and my homemade Dijon vinaigrette, which has been really good. I have been, I've been doing some eggs on toast, although I finally got sick of that and have not been doing as much. I went through a period where I was eating a lot of it, but I'm kind of over it at this point. I did go so I ran out of my acai. So I get these frozen blocks of acai from Trader Joe's, and I ran out the other day. So I'm like, oh, I can just make a protein shake without the acai in it. Of course, I just love to have as many antioxidants as possible. And so I'm like, oh, what else do I have in my closet that I could put in the shake to replace some of the antioxidants that I'm getting from the acai? And I realized I still had this small package of, I want to say salmonella. It's not salmonella. Spirulina. That's what it is. Because my friend Mike guessed it. I made this post. I'm like, does anybody know what made my shake bluish green this week? And it was this bright blue spirulina that I have. And now it's been in the closet for a while, granted. And I did look it up. It doesn't really go bad. I mean, it loses some of its nutrient density as it gets older, but it was fine. So I just added some of that. I just want to use the rest of it because I'm like, it's only going to sit here longer if I don't use it all. So I'm trying to just add it to the rest of my shakes and just use it up. So I use it because it's, it wasn't cheap and it is really healthy for you. When I looked it up, it said, don't use it if it has like a strong fish taste, which obviously I would not have used it in my shake if it had a strong fish taste. It did not. So anyway, so I'm using some of that. And then I did go and pick up some 15-pound weights. So at my home gym, I have heavy kettlebells. I have a 40-pound, I have a 30-pound, and then Chad did get, because I did want some heavier weights, and he got this like basically barbell that has adjustable weights. So you can like turn this thing off and remove some of the weights, and then I hate it. I hate having to do that when I just want to lift weights. So I ended up getting two 15-pound dumbbells, and then eventually I'll get 20. But I just wanted to start with the 15s and start to slowly add a little bit more weight when I'm doing my lunges and squats and stuff like that, shoulder presses. So I was very glad that I made that little investment for my home gym. And then what else? I mean, I did eat almost all of the curried potatoes that I'd made with the walnuts in my Thai soup. So I've continued to do the Thai soup at work. We did have a group meeting recently, and I thought maybe we'd have lunch at this meeting, but we didn't. He just brought sweet stuff. So I had gone all day without eating lunch, and I was starving. And I didn't want to just go buy chips or something at work. I did want something that was healthy because it was like I think it was a Thursday that we had this meeting last week. And I talk about how all the time there's food everywhere at this company. And usually it's pizza or burritos, or it's just not the healthiest food. Cake, cupcakes, you name it. But this day they had salad. They had this huge, like, one of those big trays of just lettuce that they put out. And then there's all these different toppings that you can put on it. And they had this red wine vinaigrette. My mouth's watering. It was so good. So luckily my little colleague next to me was like, hey, I was just saying how hungry I was, but I wanted something healthy. And he's like, hey, there's salad in the break room if you want some. I'm like, really? So I'm like, let me just pause my workstation here and run over there. And they did. I was able to make this big salad and put chicken and some cheese and cucumbers and and carrots and this red wine vinaigrette. And oh, it was perfect. It didn't cost me a penny. It was like, yes, finally free food at work that actually is healthy and is hitting that spot that I needed hit. You know, when you like are really want something good, but that's also like good for you, and you find that one thing that satisfies you and is healthy. That was that salad. So I was very, very excited about that. So yeah, so today I'll probably bring, I don't know what I'm going to bring because I still have some of that Thai soup. I'll probably just bring that Thai soup. It's just so easy to bring, and it's healthy and it's satisfying because I'm always cold at this office. So I'll probably bring that. But I am continuing to work out. So at least even while I'm overly indulging on ultra processed foods this month, I have still been getting regular workouts in. And again, that is some balance and some nutrient dense food and vegetables and stuff throughout the week. So that's been good. But starting next month, I'm doing a lot of those healthier things, which I'm excited about. So anyway, those were my healthy habits of the week. I hope all of you have had some great healthy habits this week yourselves. All right, let's talk about my tasty treats of the week. So that meeting that I just mentioned where I was hoping there'd be lunch or something, what they ended up serving was this brownie sundae. So I walk into this meeting and everyone's like, I was a little bit late because I was on a late call. And as soon as I walked in, they're like, oh, Veronica, do you want to get a brownie sundae? And I'm like, sure. Like, yeah, I'm not going to say no to that. So, because again, like next month, if they offered me that, I'll say no. I'll be like, no, I'm not indulging this week on things like that, maybe next month. But this day I'm like, sure. So they had this huge tub of vanilla ice cream. So I put a bunch of vanilla ice cream, and one of my coworkers had made brownies. So I put a brownie on there. And then they had all kinds of candy as toppings. They had Heath Bar, they had Snickers, they had Butterfinger. I'm like, okay, let's make this up. So that was my lunch before I finally got that salad because I'm like, I need vegetables. But anyway, the brownie sundae was delicious. So I had that brownie sundae. And then what else? So I made some homemade guac again. So my friend Brandy had a vision board party this past Sunday, and she wanted me to make some homemade guacamole. So I ended up making some homemade guac again, and I brought it over. And she had gotten this tray of like taquitos and tacos and some Mexican delicious food. And her mom had made a homemade queso, and there was really good salsa and mimosas. And so I had a bunch of that food over there and updated my vision board mainly with inspiring, aspirational, affirmations, essentially about money, about my future, about success, about traveling and my partner. So good stuff. I'm glad I finally was able to do that. And then what else? So yesterday on Sunday, I had this frozen pizza in the freezer that I wanted to eat to get it out of the house for next month. So it was like this mushroom flatbread pizza from Trader Joe's, which was really good. Chad made his sausage pasta dish, so I had some of that. And then lots of sweet stuff. So, and this is my diet culture brain. Now I will say that this is not the healthiest habit to have, because when I am going to be embarking on my whole foods journey, I do have that mentality of, all right, I got to get it in this week because I'm not going to have it for a month, which is a very like diet culture-y thing to do, but whatever. So when I went grocery shopping last week at Trader Joe's, I got just a bunch of ultra processed junk. I got that hot honey popcorn. I got these chocolate covered pretzels. I got these chocolate covered toffee chips. I got some candy, some straight up like Haribo Swedish fish candy, and some, some Sour Patch Kids or something like that. I got, so just a lot of junk and crap chips, because I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna be doing chips next month. So anyway, so I've been eating all that stuff, and some of it has been this week too, as I try to get rid of it. And so that's been, obviously delicious, but again, too much of that stuff is not, it like loses its luster. It really does. So that's why I know that like my normal 80-20 rule of eating is what's best. And I will be going back to that in March. I think in February, it's going to be like 99% whole foods every day, because I will have like a little bit of dark chocolate. I've been reading more and hearing more and more about how dark chocolate truly is medicinal. And so I'm like, and I will need my sweet tooth managed, which I'm going to do through fruit. And I will have a little bit of dark chocolate just because it is healthy and there are antioxidants and all kinds of health benefits to them. So I'll be doing that. And then I've been trying to get rid of all this cheese that I brought into my house, because and I obviously, we're going to talk about the new food pyramid in a minute, which highlights whole dairy, whole fat dairy, and cheese is amongst them. But I've been I think, overdoing it on the cheese. Like when I got that block of Pecorino Romano, I'm like, okay, I'm setting myself up for failure here, but I do want to try to get rid of the rest of it this week. I've been eating a lot of bread, butter, and cheese. So toasting a piece of sourdough, putting a thin layer of butter, and then that bite of cheese on it. It is heaven. It really is so delicious, this cheese. And this, now the sourdough at Trader Joe's, I have to say, is freaking excellent. It really is. The sliced sourdough bread, I've been comparing it to what I've been getting at like Costco and these other places, and Trader Joe's blows it out of the water. So anyway, so I'm finishing that up, and I think I'm not going to have bread next month, and that's going to be a challenge. I'll have rice, but cutting out the sourdough is going to be a huge challenge, which I'm ready for. I think I've also been overdoing it on the bread, and certainly continuing to bring tons of loaves of bread into the house isn't good for Chad either. So we're both going to be cutting down on our bread next month, period. But now we have to get rid of the rest that's in our house. So anyway, so those are my tasty treats of the week. I hope all of you have had some delicious, tasty treats this week yourselves. All right, now let's get into my podcast review. Now, I actually meant to talk about this on my last free one, but I totally forgot. I skipped over this section and didn't even realize it was there. But what I decided to do is make it a larger section and actually review a podcast around it, because I wanted to get the perspective of someone smarter than me, right? So they're on the Docs Who Lift podcast. They had Dr. Kevin Klatt. So he's a PhD. He's assistant professor of medicine. He's a registered dietitian. He has a PhD in molecular nutrition. So he's very, very, very knowledgeable. And then he was on the Docs Who Lift podcast with Dr. Nadolski, both Kevin and Spencer. And Carl Nadolski and Spencer. So the Docs Who Lift, they're usually talking about GLP-1s because they are weight loss doctors, but that also lift a lot of weights. And, they're those buff doctors that understand, the importance of protein and lifting weights. And, that's good for their clients, right? Because they do work with a lot of women that are using these GLP-1s, and they do need them to keep building muscle. And so, and I'm just going to call him Dr. Kevin. I mean, he's a PhD, but just to keep it simple. He started talking about on this podcast how the first dietary guidelines came out in the 1980s. They were made by the USDA, Health and Human Services, and it started out just giving people very simple recommendations that evolved over time. And so they started out very basic, like eat less sugar, eat less fat, manage your weight, limit alcohol. And he said around 2005, they got more quantitative in terms of portions and servings, not just eat more fruits and vegetables, but, eat less than 10% of your calories from sugar and saturated fat. And he said they became more involved and more meant for healthcare providers and policymakers who were going to adapt them across various settings, various federal programs for like SNAP, for example. And policies needed to be aligned with these guidelines. And he said overall, there hasn't been a dramatic change in these guidelines. He's like, I think people want the guidelines to be this like magical thing, but it's really a small tool that influences things like school lunch, where you see progress that has been made. He said a lot of times the dietary guidelines get politicized. He said, for example, Michelle Obama was trying to make nutrition a centerpiece, and she was criticized for being the food police. He goes, now you have MAHA, the whole Make America Healthy Again movement. He said, which is very controversial to some people. And so one of the doctors, Dr. Spencer, was like, well, when did the first food pyramid come out? He said, everybody seems to be focused on that. And Kevin was like 1992. And Dr. Nadolsky was like, well, it looks like I can eat all the bread I want on that one. And he said, well, he's like, then a new one came out that was called My Plate. He said it was meant to be more simplified for consumers overall. But Dr. Nadolsky said, what I see and what there's a lot of noise about, there just seems to be a lot of people self-congratulating themselves over this new food pyramid. He said, and I think My Plate was pretty similar. He said it's been similar in that they're making more of a bias towards saturated animal fat. He goes, but what exactly are the discrepancies? Like, what's the difference, the biggest differences between the previous guidelines and the current ones? And yeah, and the other doctor, his brother, was like, yeah, the fake food they say everybody's eating, and now we get to eat real food. Like, where did they say that eat fake food? And Kevin said that, yeah, there was a release on eatrealfood.gov. They released a 10-page dietary guideline. Then they released a daily serving guide for how much to eat of each food group. He said, then there's a scientific review document that explains some of the deviations that they made from the Dietary Advisory Committee report. He goes, then we got the new food pyramid. So there was a lot to digest. And at a very high level, he said, I've been calling it a nothing burger with an emphasis on the burger. He said, where if you read the actual 10-page report, a lot of it is the same as previous guidelines. He said, but if you look at the daily servings guide, a lot of it looks similar as well. It's the same, protein, fruits, vegetables, dairy, whole grains, and oils. He said, if you look at the text, it's a lot of reasonable recommendations. Eat fruits and vegetables, keep sugar low. He said they are very aggressive in certain areas, like keep kids under 10 from eating any added sugar. He said, and you can argue that's aspirational or completely impossible. He said they said eat meat and dairy, of course, and they talked about tailoring for infancy. He said you can tell that pediatricians wrote it. He said they talk a lot about fat that's found naturally in food, like from meat and eggs and nuts and avocado and olives. He said, so that's a pretty substantial difference from the past. He said they do recommend full fat dairy. So some of these we would have considered healthy fats, like the avocado, oils, and nuts. He said, but then they took out recommendations for seed oils and instead specifically recommend to cook in olive oil, butter, or beef tallow. He said, so they have a scientific review of the concerns of cooking in seed oils, but then they confusingly want to keep the cap at 10% saturated fat. And Dr. Spencer said, well, that's what I was going to ask you about. That's very confusing. He said, everyone's saying, oh, they're telling you to eat more saturated fat, but the percentage hasn't changed. And Dr. Kevin said, yeah, right, these things don't align on the surface. And this dovetails into another new recommendation, which is increasing the amount of protein that you're eating. He said they increased it from 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, where the old recommendation was between 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. He said with some variations, of course, across life stages, gender, and body weights. He said, but for the average adult, they recommend eating around 100 grams of protein per day, which is a big increase. He said, so it would be a little tricky to increase the amount of protein, especially from animal sources, and still keep the 10% saturated fat in line. And so Dr. Spencer talks about, wanting to create a line of low-fat beef or get a low-fat beef sponsor. He talks about how there's some beef brands that are between 93 to 96% fat-free. He said, I saw a guy on Instagram showing the dietary guidelines were like, and he had a sirloin topped with 0% fat Greek yogurt. He's like, he goes, so I understand, lean meats of cut, but I personally prefer some of the fattier cuts of meat just because they taste better. And Dr. Kevin said, the old food pyramid didn't say eliminate all fatty meat and full fat dairy. It was emphasizing minimizing those things. But when you're communicating with the public, the public's not going to calculate their percentage of calories and fat. They're just not going to do it. He said, so you emphasize the fat sources that are lower in them and restrict fat sources that are higher in them, but we never recommended cooking in butter. And so that's a big change. We used to emphasize cooking in the more unsaturated fats. So that is where the recommendations don't align with one another. They lay out a whole meal plan of the daily serving and food group recommendations and look at whether a person can meet the nutrient requirements of fiber, protein, etc. He said with the food patterns we're recommending. He said, so now you have to get way more protein, but the protein recommendations don't always make sense. He said, for example, they're equating 1 egg to 3 ounces of meat or poultry. So you've got 6 grams of protein equating to maybe 20 grams of protein. And he said the actual food serving sizes are all over the place, ranging from 6 to 26 grams of protein per serving, and they recommend 3 to 4 servings. So sorry, if you're only incorporating proteins like nuts or seeds, that's only going to be about 6 grams of protein. So you either have to eat meat or Greek yogurt to meet these recommendations. And Dr. Nodalski's like, well, it's like bodybuilder recommendations, but not even because a bodybuilder would probably eat even leaner cuts of meat and more carbs. He said, not the high fat proteins. And Dr. Carl said, yeah, it's a little weird because they say incorporate full fat dairy, but then if you're supposed to stay under 10% saturated fat, what you really need to do is use non-fat Greek yogurt and combine that with the meats to meet these recommendations, right? And Dr. Kevin was like, well, it's really not clear. I mean, he said they say you have to have 3 servings of dairy, but did they mean 3 full fat servings of dairy, or just one of those servings should be full fat? He said you could argue that they're trying to allow for some sort of flexibility, but overall, it's hard to plan a diet with the recommendations they're making. He said, then if you look at the pyramid, they created it looks like a low carb pyramid. He said they've kind of inverted the pyramid and what it's supposed to convey. At the bottom of the things you should emphasize with the amount of proportions relative to what the text would say. And as you go up, you're supposed to have had smaller portions. And at the top of things, you should minimize. But they flip the pyramid upside down. And it's massive cuts of steak, an entire turkey, big wedges of cheese, whole things of whole milk, eggs, salmon, yogurt. He goes, and then you get like a single nut. He's like, you get one each of a single nut, like an almond. And as you get closer to the point of the pyramid, you get some non-starchy vegetables and fruits. He said in the top you have whole grains, which before the top of things, it was the things you minimize. But the text doesn't recognize minimizing whole grains. They emphasize it. So just like the portions, the portion sizes don't align with what the text is saying. He said, so this food pyramid kind of slaps you in the face and says, eat a ton of animal protein, eat vegetables and some fruit, minimize whole grains, but there's no lentils or chickpeas or beans. He said, so it's really just like green beans or frozen peas, and you can miss a lot of healthy plant food sources. He said, this is where a lot of people were worried that they were going full out on animal protein. I mean, they do mention in the text a mixture of healthy plant proteins and animal proteins, but as we were talking before, based on serving size recommendations, you're not going to hit the percentages you need. You need like 75% animal protein to meet those nutrition goals, especially in terms of grams of protein. So then Dr. Nadolsky's like, well, how is this going to affect school lunches, for example? And then the other doctors said, well, it's not like the old pyramid because they were saying go eat processed food. He said, that's what drives me insane. Because everyone's like, oh, we're finally talking about eat real food. And we're still eating more fruits and vegetables. And then the other doctor's like, well, no one's going to follow these guidelines anyway. And Dr. Kevin said, well, that's the only thing in this guideline that they have a lot of language around is processed foods. They had a call out for defining ultra processed food, but the definition hasn't been finalized yet. So no one can really agree on these things. When people think processed food, I was kind of joking, it's like porn. You know it when you see it, but no one can come up with a definition for it. That's kind of how processed food is. People have been trying to come up with a scientific term for junk food, and they haven't really succeeded. So if they settle on not using ultra processed, just like they just use the word highly processed and throw some vague definitions out there, which people are cheering about. And I guess if you're in the foodie movement, you're happy about these facts, that they're trying to define these things. He said, but I've worked in a lot of clinical dietetic settings, and if you ask every tier on the socioeconomic spectrum what processed food is, you'd get a variety of answers. And the moment you tell people that their protein powder is processed and their oat milk latte is processed, they get really pissed. He said, so overall, it's hard to create language around what processed or ultra processed is when federal regulations can be created. He said you have to be able to find something to enforce it. So, he's like, I'm not sure how this will affect school lunch, except I do assume there will be a return of whole milk back in schools. He said one of the things the guidelines is also saying is that meat and it's meat and dairy heavy. And they are missing out on alternatives like meat alternatives or soy alternatives. So people have expressed concern, for example, if you're lactose intolerant or if you just don't eat dairy or meat, these guidelines barely consider you. He said, even though they have a whole section on vegans and vegetarians, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. They kind of make it sound like if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you're going to be nutrient deficient in a lot of areas. He said, so some people think the new food pyramid makes sense. He said, I personally think there's portion distortion on the imagery of this new food pyramid because the text itself just does predict some of the imagery. He said, so right now there are specific school lunch standards like different serving amounts per week that they need to be consumed from fruits and vegetables and whole grains and protein, caps on sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. He said, so it's not clear which of these are going to stay and which of these are going to go. He said, you will see stricter sugar guidelines. but it's given a per meal or per snack designation rather than less than 10% of calories consumed. What I always emphasize is what we've always said: eat less sugar, eat more fiber, eat fruits and vegetables. For 40 years, we've said that and done nothing. So that should tell you that the power of these dietary guidelines is pretty weak. He said it's just a starting point for policymakers. And there's so much emphasis around what the guidelines say and not what they're actually doing with the guidelines. And the doctor started joking that, well, we're meatheads, we love meat. He said, we do argue that having some red meat is healthy, at least in small portions in line with a well-balanced diet. He said, what I don't like is let's cook in butter and beef tallow. He said, I think that's completely out of line with the science. Eating more fruits and vegetables, or at least nuts and seeds, having nuts and seeds in there, the olives, the avocados, the dairy. We can even have a nuanced discussion because cheese is overall good for people. Yogurt and salmon, of course. He's like, that's great. But if people are eating more fast food because they're cooking it in beef tallow, that's obviously not going to make much sense. And Dr. Kevin said, well, that's the thing, is how people interpret it. Because if you're thinking about the American diet as KFC and you're eating fried food all the time, that's obviously, this pyramid would be much better. But this food pyramid doesn't convey the up-to-date science. What they release lends itself to many different interpretations. You can see whatever you want to see in this because there's so many inherent contradictions. Some people say it's a nothing burger. It's pretty much the same as before. And some people are calling it a radical change. He said there's a lot of propaganda being used, like, oh, we're finally going to end the war on protein. And, oh, we're finally going to end past guidelines that promoted ultra-processed foods. I mean, can you tell me where it said in the old guidelines, eat less protein and eat more ultra-processed foods? Because I looked and I couldn't find it. Dr. Kevin said it doesn't really exist. He said, there were some controversial things like protein equivalencies, but it wasn't anything that was going to set up the public for some major decline in their health status. Unfortunately, food has always often been politicized, and this new food pyramid is putting it on steroids. So I thought that was a good breakdown overall of the new food pyramid, of the MAHA focus and guidelines. When I saw the new food pyramid, it did strike me that there were a limited amount of vegetarian proteins on there. Like the little couple of nuts, I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of a vegetarian protein, but things like tofu, and to their point, like soybeans, right? Tofu is derived from soybeans. So that was a thought, like, well, what about vegetarians? What are they going to do? They're not going to eat that steak that's up at the top of the food pyramid. And I was surprised. I do see the benefit in whole dairy in some ways, but also like that big block of cheese. On my VIP episode, I just talked about this article of this woman who lost 60 pounds in a few months just cutting out cheese because she was eating cheese out of control. And again, cheese is something that I want to cut back on a little bit as I embark in this, my focus in February. And so that's a little bit, that's interesting. And then there's, of course, cooking in butter, cooking in beef tallow. The science doesn't show necessarily from what I've seen. Like, I'm believing the experts that are more being like people are talking too much about the harms of seed oils. I don't necessarily see it as much of these other health gurus. I don't know that cooking in butter or beef tallow is necessarily better than cooking in vegetable oil or canola oil. So anyway, that's my own thought on that. I do think that the new guidelines around more protein is important. I understand what they're saying in terms of the contradiction in terms of keeping the saturated fat really low, but also keep the percentage of animal meat high. Because one of the things that I am curious about noticing about my own body as I go through this next month of eating less, hopefully less saturated fat, I am going to look and see if I see changes in the fat that my body's holding on to in certain areas, because I'm just wondering if the amount of cheese I've been having has been affecting my body in certain areas in a negative way. So I'm very in tune with what's going on in my body, and so I am curious as I make some of these changes if I see a difference. But they also talked about how there isn't this very specific limit on alcohol anymore. I think Dr. Oz was talking about, oh, well, alcohol is the social lubricant for our society. And it's like, oh, okay, interesting. I guess we don't have to limit our alcohol anymore. Well, good news for me. No, but I mean, obviously the text is still saying like limit, just a high level limit alcohol. There were more specific guidelines before, which I think it's interesting that they changed that. But that didn't make sense to me. But yeah, where I think the emphasis of eat processed food came about, because they're very confused on it. Here's my hypothesis. When there was more emphasis on grains and cereals, and cereal became this huge part of the American diet, and there were a lot of minerals like vitamins, and minerals put into some of the processed food that was made, or even ultra processed foods, right? Like some of the General Mills cereals, for example, have a lot of added vitamins and minerals and nutrients that are essential for our body. So the thought of doing that is, okay, yes, Americans are eating more processed foods or ultra processed foods, but they are getting these sources of folic acid, or they're getting these sources of these minerals that we do need to incorporate more into the American diet. And so they were put into the manufacturing of these products. And if those are cut out, are Americans going to be undernourished? So I think that emphasis on the additives in terms of extra minerals and vitamins that were added into ultra processed foods, I do think that that's where some of this thought process of, oh, Americans are being taught to eat processed foods or fake food, I think that's really where it came from, because it is hard to just, that's why people take additional supplements like a multivitamin, because it is hard to get everything you need just from natural food sources, right? So anyway, so that's where I think it came from. But anyway, it's obviously a hot topic right now, and I did want to cover it on the show. I think they are, like, some of the things that Dr. Nodelskis are talking about. They're like, look, we've always talked about eat fruits and vegetables, and most Americans are just not doing it. And that is, I mean, when I work at this food pantry, the amount of fresh whole food compared to processed packaged food that's given out, I mean, 90% at least is processed, packaged, high carb, lower protein foods. Very smaller percentage is whole foods, whole proteins, and vegetable or fruit sources. So that's a problem too, right? People that have a lack of access to some of these whole foods. Anyway, so that's a topic for another day. But anyway, that is the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a rating or review for this show on iTunes. Leave a comment on YouTube. Click that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. It doesn't cost a penny, but it really helps us podcasters. I will be sharing a clip of some of my premium content shows on YouTube so people can get a little taste of it. And then if you're interested in hearing the whole episode, you can subscribe through Patreon or wherever you listen to podcasts and get those premium content, extra juicy shows. That's going to be, if you have any topics you'd like me to cover though, definitely DM me at the Diet Obsessed Podcast on Instagram. That's the best way to reach me. And until we meet again, I hope all of you have a very balanced week.